A lot of people believe that the issue of poverty is about personal responsibility. If only people who are poor could take personal responsibility of their lives, poverty would go away. But the issue of poverty is a structural one primarily. And one of the areas that we need to look at is how the criminal justice system impacts poverty, how it drives poverty, how it causes it. Because it plays an enormous role in making people poor and keeping them poor. Let's start with some numbers. The United States leads the world in incarceration. We currently have 2.4 million people behind bars, way more than China does, and China's a much more populous country than the United States. 1 in 3 African American males can expect to spend time in prison during their lifetimes, compared to 1 in 17 for white men, and 1 in 111 for white women. The problem, when you look at it that way, think about what happens in communities of color, where the police target folks for prosecution, disproportionately lock up people of color in struggling communities. That destroys the fabric of communities, destroys the fabric of communities. And it's not to say that the police shouldn't arrest people who are committing serious wrongs in the community. That's not the point. But the point is, when we lock up so many folks who've been convicted or been charged with nonviolent drug offenses, we are taking fathers and brothers and uncles, earners, out of the communities and making it much more difficult for their families to survive. But that's not the end of the picture, because what happens when people come home after they've been released from prison further drives the issue of poverty. In the state of Ohio, we have over 800 laws on the books that restrict the ability of people to work in certain industries when they come home. For example, you want to start your own construction company, and maybe you've learned some building trades in prison. You can't own your own construction company if you have a felony conviction. Want to get a job working in healthcare? Good luck with a felony record. That's probably not going to happen. And so we've got these 800 laws that restrict the ability of people to find work and earn a living, just based solely on the fact of a criminal conviction. That makes it extremely difficult for people to support their families. How are you going to support a family if you can't get a job because you've got this scarlet F by your name, the scarlet F of having a felony conviction? So we need to look at how we can address the over-incarceration problem that we have in this, not just in Cincinnati and Hamilton County, but across the country. And we also need to address the problem of how do we reintegrate people who have done their time, served their sentences, and now they're home, and they just want to work and get on their feet and be productive. We are not going to be able to address poverty in our community unless we also focus on criminal justice reform. One of the things that we're trying to do at the Ohio Justice and Policy Center is to get more private sector employers to hire people with a felony record. We've been very successful in working with the legislature to create something called certificates of qualification for employment. And what those do is that if someone wants to show that they've been rehabilitated, they can apply to the court, tell their story of rehabilitation, and if they get a court-issued certificate showing rehabilitation, then one thing that does is it removes the mandatory you can't work in certain fields, the mandatory bars of working in certain industries. But it also allows employers who hire people with a certificate to be protected against a lawsuit for hiring somebody with a felony record. So what we need to do, the next step of that, is to get more private sector employers to hire people with felony records. We've already gotten through bandbox laws that we helped engineer in Cincinnati and across the state now. And bandbox basically means that for municipal jobs and state government jobs, folks aren't, their applications aren't thrown in the garbage can just because they have a felony record. In fact, what the municipal and government employers do now is they look at the total rehabilitation story and make a decision based on whether the person's qualified to work. And then if they've got a criminal record, then the record is looked at in context of how long ago it happened and what their rehabilitation has been. But we need to get private sector employers to step up and hire people with felony records. Until we do that, we're going to have an underemployment problem in the community for people who have made mistakes but paid for those mistakes and now are willing to be productive, contributing members of the community. So many of the corporate businesses in our community believe in the mission of United Way and have signed on to the United Way's pledge of reducing poverty in our communities. But if those businesses are really serious about reducing poverty, then my challenge to them is to step up and hire people in this community who have criminal records and a demonstrated record of rehabilitation. If you want to address the structural reasons that make it difficult for some in our community to work, and specifically I'm speaking of people who have been in the criminal justice system, then make a pledge to hire people with felony records and follow through on that pledge.